Stop everything you're doing right now and reflect with me on something that may be destroying your peace without you even realizing it. Have you ever stopped to think about why you feel so tired, so empty, even without doing anything extraordinary? Why it seems like your energy is always being drained, as if there were an invisible hole sucking out your vitality? The answer may lie in something you do every single day, something our modern society has turned into a virtue, but that the great sages of antiquity identified as a silent poison to the soul. Socrates, the man who changed Western philosophy forever, discovered a powerful secret more than 2,400 years ago. A secret so revolutionary that it cost him his life, but one that today can save yours. And I promise you that by the end of this video, the final revelation will be so impactful that you will never look at your relationships the same way again. Are you ready to discover what it really means to value your time and your presence? Before we continue, subscribe to the channel now, because what you're about to discover will completely transform the way you relate to people, to your work, and, most importantly, to yourself. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any teaching that can change your life. Let's start with an uncomfortable truth. You are always available. Your phone is always within reach. Your messages are answered in seconds. You cancel your plans to attend to others. You interrupt your rest, your work, your moment of peace because someone needs you. And do you know what happens? People stop valuing your presence. They stop respecting your time. And worse, you stop respecting yourself. Socrates walked through the streets of Athens with a posture that intrigued everyone. He didn't chase after anyone. He didn't beg for attention. He didn't bow before the powerful. He was simply present, but never too available. And that created something extraordinary around him, an irresistible magnetism. The most influential people in Athens sought his company. Young men abandoned their obligations to listen to him, and even his enemies couldn't ignore him. But how did he do that? Through a fundamental principle he applied in every interaction, in every conversation, in every moment of his life. Socrates understood that the value of something is directly related to its scarcity. When you are always available, you become common, predictable, disposable. But when you set clear boundaries, when you protect your time and your energy with the ferocity of a warrior defending his territory, something magical happens. Let me tell you a story that perfectly illustrates this concept. In Athens, there was a rich and arrogant young man named Alcibiades, famous for his beauty and for getting everything he wanted. He was used to people begging for his attention, fighting for his favor. But when he met Socrates, something unprecedented happened. For the first time in his life, Alcibiades encountered someone who wasn't impressed by his beauty, his wealth, or his status. Socrates talked with him, yes, but only when he had something meaningful to say. He wasn't available when Alcibiades wanted, but when the moment was right. And do you know what happened? Alcibiades became obsessed with earning the attention and respect of Socrates. A young man who could have anyone at his feet spent years trying to prove his worth to someone who simply wasn't always available. This is not just an ancient story. It's a timeless lesson about human nature and personal value. Now look at your life. How many times have you ignored your own needs to be available for someone who didn't even appreciate your sacrifice? How many times have you replied to messages immediately, cancelled your plans, interrupted your important work, only to find out it could have waited? How many times have you felt like you were giving more than you received, trying harder than you should, and still being treated as something common, something guaranteed? The truth is that when you are always available, you teach people not to value your presence. You teach them that your time has no worth, that your needs can wait, that you will always be there, no matter how they treat you. And that isn't generosity, it isn't kindness, it isn't love. It is self-sabotage disguised as virtue. Socrates practiced what the Stoics later called self-discipline and self-respect. He understood that in order to have healthy and meaningful relationships, you must first have a healthy relationship with yourself. And that means setting clear boundaries. It means saying no when necessary. It means protecting your time, your energy, and your peace of mind as if they were the most precious treasures you have, because they are. Think about this. When you meet someone who is always available, always eager to please, always willing to drop everything for you, what is your reaction? Do you respect that person more or less? Do you value their time more or less? The truth hurts, but it must be said. We humans have a disturbing tendency to devalue what we obtain easily and to value what requires effort. Socrates had a peculiar method of teaching that reveals exactly how he applied this principle in practice. When someone approached him with a question, he didn't answer immediately. He didn't seem eager to share his knowledge. On the contrary, he asked more questions. He challenged the person to think, to reflect, to work for that wisdom. And do you know why? Because he knew that knowledge obtained easily is knowledge discarded easily. Imagine the scene. A young Athenian, full of certainties, approaches Socrates in the public square, wanting to debate justice. Most sophists of the time, those who sold knowledge, would have immediately begun a long speech, showing off their eloquence and wisdom. But not Socrates. He looked the young man in the eyes and asked, in a simple yet devastating way, "What do you understand by justice?" And then began a process the Greeks called maiutics, the birth of ideas. Socrates didn't hand out ready-made answers. He wasn't available like an open book. He made the person work, think, question their own beliefs. And the result? Those who went through this process valued every insight, every discovery immensely because they had earned that knowledge through their own effort. They couldn't simply discard it because they had invested time, mental energy, and even emotional struggle to reach it. Now let me bring this to your reality. When you're always available to solve other people's problems, to give advice, to offer help that isn't truly valued, you're robbing them of the opportunity to grow. You're creating dependency instead of capability, and you're draining yourself in the process because no one values what they didn't have to work for. But there's something even deeper happening here. When you stop being constantly available, you're not just changing how others see you. You're fundamentally changing who you are. You're reclaiming something that has been lost in the rush of modern life, something Socrates defended with his own life: your autonomy, your dignity, your unshakable inner center. The Stoics, who came after Socrates and were deeply influenced by him, had a concept called autarkia, which means emotional self-sufficiency. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, wrote in his Meditations that happiness doesn't come from external sources, but from within. He learned that constantly seeking validation from others, being endlessly available in hopes of being loved or accepted, is handing over your power to forces you cannot control. Think about how this shows up in your daily life. Do you check your phone compulsively, waiting for messages? Do you feel anxious when you don't reply instantly? Are you afraid people will forget about you if you aren't always present? These are signs that you've handed your center of control to the external world. You've become a slave to availability, and it's destroying your inner peace. Socrates had a powerful phrase that echoed through the centuries. He said, "Know thyself." But what does that really mean? It means that before you make yourself available to the world, you need to be available to yourself. Before you give your time to others, you need time to cultivate your own mind, your own soul, your own dreams and goals. Let me ask you a question that will hurt but needs to be asked. When was the last time you spent an entire hour alone, with no distractions, no phone, no one demanding your attention, just you with yourself? When was the last time you prioritized your needs, your desires, your dreams above the demands of others? If you're struggling to answer these questions, you already know what the problem is. Constant availability is a modern trap disguised as connectivity. We have more ways to communicate than any generation before us, yet we are more disconnected from ourselves than ever. We have thousands of virtual friends, yet we feel deeply alone. And why? Because we've forgotten Socrates' fundamental teaching. The quality of your relationships is infinitely more important than the quantity. And quality requires boundaries, requires selectiveness, requires that you are not always available to everyone. Look at the people you truly admire and respect. Are they always available? Do they answer messages in seconds? Do they cancel important commitments to meet every demand? Of course not. The people who've achieved something meaningful in life, the people who have inner peace and healthy relationships, they all understand the value of not being constantly available. If you're watching this far and you feel this message resonating deeply within you, hit the like button on this video right now. That simple gesture helps the algorithm deliver this message to more people who need to hear it. And believe me, there are millions of people trapped in this cycle of constant availability, destroying their peace and wondering why they feel so empty. Now let's dive deeper into this concept, because what I'm about to reveal will completely change the way you see your relationships. Socrates didn't just practice strategic unavailability, he taught something even more revolutionary. He taught that most people live in what he called unconscious ignorance. They don't know that they don't know. And this applies perfectly to the topic we're exploring. Most people don't realize they're self-destructing by being constantly available. They think they're being good people, being helpful, being loved. But in reality, they're creating a destructive pattern where their presence loses value, where their energy is constantly drained, and where they become invisible precisely because they're always visible. It's a cruel paradox, but absolutely real. Let me tell you about another crucial moment in Socrates' life that illustrates this perfectly. When he was accused of corrupting the youth and disrespecting the gods of Athens, he had a clear opportunity to save himself. His friends prepared everything for his escape. He could have easily fled the prison, left Athens, and lived his remaining years in peace in another city. Many expected him to do so. After all, it would have been the logical thing to do. But Socrates did something that shocked everyone. He refused. He chose to drink the hemlock and die instead of compromising his principles. And why? Because he understood that being available to run away, to avoid the consequences of his teachings, would betray everything he had stood for his entire life. It would show that his principles were negotiable, that his word had no real value, that he was willing to change according to circumstances. This is the deepest lesson about not being constantly available. It's not just about saying no to others. It's about saying yes to your own values, your own principles, your own integrity, even when it costs you, especially when it costs you, because it's in those moments that you define who you truly are. Now, I know what you might be thinking, but I don't want to be selfish. I don't want to disappoint the people I love. I don't want to seem arrogant or distant, and that is exactly the trap that keeps you stuck. You're confusing healthy boundaries with selfishness. You're confusing self-respect with arrogance. You're confusing strategic unavailability with indifference. Let's clear this up once and for all. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's emotional survival. Not being constantly available isn't cruelty, it's wisdom. Protecting your time and energy isn't arrogance, it's recognizing your worth. And when you start acting based on these principles, something extraordinary happens. The right people, the ones who truly deserve to be in your life, respect your boundaries. They value your presence even more precisely because it becomes more meaningful. But the wrong people, the ones who are only using you, the ones who only showed up when they needed something, those people begin to disappear from your life. And that's not a loss, it's a liberation. It's like Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living, and that includes unexamined relationships, relationships where you give without receiving, where you're always available but never truly valued. The Stoics had a powerful exercise called premeditatio malorum, which means premeditation of evils. They imagined the worst-case scenarios to prepare themselves emotionally. But you know what's interesting? When you apply this to the concept of availability, you realize something liberating. The worst-case scenario of not being constantly available is that some people might get upset with you. They might call you selfish. They might distance themselves. But you know the worst-case scenario of always being available? You lose yourself completely. You become an empty shell, living to fulfill other people's expectations, with no time for your own dreams, no energy for your own passions, no peace for your own soul. You become a stranger to yourself, and that price is infinitely higher than losing a few people who, honestly, never truly valued you. Marcus Aurelius wrote something powerful that connects directly with this. He said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." When you're constantly available, you give up that power. You allow external events, other people's demands, and their expectations to control your life, your schedule, your mental peace. But when you set clear boundaries, when you fiercely protect your time and energy, when you consciously choose where and when you will be present, you take that power back. You become the protagonist of your own life instead of a supporting character in everyone else's. Now let me ask you another crucial question. Who are the 5 people you spend the most time with? Do these people respect your boundaries? Do they value your presence? Do they contribute to your life, or do they only drain your energy? Socrates said we should choose our companions with the same care we choose our food, because they nourish or poison our soul in the same way. Now let's explore the more practical and transformative dimension of this teaching. How exactly do you begin implementing this shift in your life? How do you move from being someone who's always available to someone who's strategically present? Socrates gives us the answer through his method, and it's simpler and more challenging than you might imagine. First, you need to understand that the change begins with awareness. Socrates was obsessed with self-knowledge. He would spend hours in silent contemplation, examining his own thoughts, motives, and actions. There are accounts saying he could remain still for hours, completely absorbed in deep reflection. This wasn't just a peculiar habit, it was a deliberate practice to strengthen his inner center. So the first practical change you need to make is to create spaces of silence in your life. Turn off the phone, close social media, sit with yourself, and ask the hard questions. Why do you feel you need to be always available? Where does this need come from? Is it fear of rejection, low self-esteem, a pattern learned in childhood? You can't change what you don't understand, and you can't understand what you don't examine. Second, you need to start small, but start now. Don't try to change everything at once. The Stoics were masters of gradual, sustainable change. Epictetus, another great Stoic philosopher, taught that we should focus on what is within our control and accept what is not. And guess what? What is entirely within your control is how you manage your time and your availability. Start by creating a simple rule. Don't reply to messages immediately unless it's a real emergency. And no, most of the things we call urgent are not emergencies. Someone asking if you can do something 3 days from now is not an emergency. Someone asking for your opinion on something trivial is not an emergency. A co-worker who could easily solve something on their own is not an emergency. Set specific times to check and respond to messages. 2 or 3 times a day is more than enough, and watch what happens. At first, you will feel anxiety. Your brain has been conditioned to seek that instant validation, that dopamine hit that comes from every notification, every immediate reply. But resist. This anxiety is temporary. What comes after it is liberating. Third, and this is crucial, learn to say no without over-explaining. Socrates was a master at this. When he didn't want to do something, he simply didn't do it. He didn't come up with elaborate excuses. He didn't bow in apology. He recognized that his time had value and that he had the right to choose how to use it. You don't need a perfect reason to say no. "I can't" is a complete sentence. "That doesn't work for me" is a valid response. I need to prioritize other things right now is completely acceptable. Stop justifying yourself as if you needed other people's approval to have autonomy over your own life. Every time you over-justify, you're subconsciously communicating that your time is worth less than other people's time. Fourth, create non-negotiable daily rituals. Socrates had his moments of contemplation. Marcus Aurelius had his morning meditations. You need practices that are sacred, that are not available for interruption. It might be an hour of exercise, 30 minutes of reading, a solitary walk, meditation time. Whatever it is, make it inviolable. When someone tries to invade that space, you protect it with firmness. This is my reading time isn't selfish, it's self-respect. I'm in the middle of my workout isn't indifference, it's commitment to yourself. And you know what's fascinating? When you start respecting your own boundaries, people automatically start respecting them too. They realize you're not a convenient option, you're a conscious choice. Fifth, evaluate your relationships with brutal honesty. Socrates wasn't afraid of losing superficial friendships. He preferred a few true friends over many empty acquaintances. Look at the people in your life and ask yourself, would this person still be here if I weren't always available? Does this person value my presence or just my convenience? Is this relationship reciprocal or am I always the one giving? The answers will hurt. You will discover that many people you considered friends were just acquaintances taking advantage of your availability. But that pain is necessary. It's like removing an infected splinter. It hurts in the moment. But healing only begins after it's removed, and the space these people occupied in your life needs to be freed for true, deep, reciprocal relationships. Sixth, develop what the Stoics called imperturbability. This means cultivating an inner peace that doesn't depend on external approval. When you decide not to be constantly available, some people will complain. They'll test you. They'll try to make you feel guilty. This is expected and even predictable. They were used to the old you, the one who always said yes, who always showed up, who was always there. But you can't let manipulated guilt drag you back into old patterns. Remember what Socrates faced. He was judged, condemned, and executed for staying true to his principles. You're probably not going to face anything nearly that drastic for establishing healthy boundaries. At worst, you'll lose some people who never should have been in your life in the first place. Now, let's explore something few people talk about, but that is absolutely vital to understanding the full depth of this teaching, the connection between availability and identity. Who are you when you're not being useful to someone? Who are you when you're not solving other people's problems? Who are you when you're simply alone, with no one needing anything from you? These questions terrify many people because they've built their entire identity around being available. Socrates had a brutal clarity about who he was. He defined himself as a seeker of truth, a relentless questioner, a man committed to virtue above all else. His identity didn't depend on how many people sought him out, how many young men followed him, or how much approval he received. His identity was anchored in something internal, unchangeable, something no one could take from him. And that is exactly what you need to develop. When your identity is anchored in being useful, in being available, in solving other people's problems, you become a slave to that image. You constantly need to prove your worth through your usefulness. And that creates a devastating, vicious cycle. The more available you are, the more people expect you to be available. The more you solve other people's problems, the more problems show up at your door. And you never ever feel enough, because there's always one more person who needs something, one more problem to solve, one more demand waiting. The Stoics had a powerful concept for this. They distinguished between what is essential and what is indifferent. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself that the only thing that truly mattered was living according to reason and virtue. Everything else, fame, wealth, approval, even life itself, was indifferent. Not because it lacked value, but because it didn't define who he was. Apply this to your life now. Your essence, who you truly are, cannot depend on always being available. If it does, then you don't have an identity. You have a role you are performing. And when you can no longer perform that role, when you're too exhausted, when you finally set boundaries, you enter an existential crisis because you've lost your source of identity. Let me tell you something that will transform your perspective. True generosity is not being always available. True generosity is being fully present when you choose to be. It's the difference between quantity and quality. You can be available 24 hours a day, but if you're exhausted, resentful, and empty, your presence has no real value. Or you can be available in chosen moments, when you're rested, centered, genuinely present. And those moments are worth more than months of superficial availability. Socrates understood this deeply. His conversations were intense, profound, transformative. He didn't have shallow conversations just to fill time. Every interaction had weight, meaning, purpose. And why? Because he fiercely protected his mental and emotional energy. He didn't waste it on trivialities. When he chose to be present, he was completely present. Now look at your own life. How many of your interactions are superficial? How many conversations do you have where you're physically present but mentally absent, thinking about 1,000 other things, half answering the message, half doing something else? That's not generosity. It's fragmentation. And both you and the other person know, on some level, that it isn't genuine. There's a Stoic saying, "It is better to conquer yourself than to win 1,000 battles." And being always available is a battle you will never win, because there will always be more demands, more people, more problems. The only real victory is conquering control over your own life, your own schedule, your own peace of mind. Here's another deep truth that must be said. When you set boundaries and stop being always available, you're not just changing your own life, you are giving permission for others to do the same. You become a living example that it is possible to say no, that it is possible to have healthy boundaries, that it is possible to value your own time without being selfish. Think about the impact of that. How many people around you are stuck in the same cycle of constant availability, feeling guilty for wanting a moment to themselves? When they see you setting boundaries firmly but respectfully, when they realize the world doesn't end because you didn't respond to a message immediately, when they notice that real relationships grow stronger with boundaries, you are planting seeds of transformation. Socrates knew that his greatest legacy wasn't solving people's problems, but teaching them to think for themselves. He knew that giving someone a fish feeds them for a day, but teaching them to fish feeds them forever. In the same way, being always available may help someone momentarily, but teaching healthy boundaries transforms lives permanently. Epictetus, who was a slave before becoming one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, said something revolutionary. He said that true freedom is not doing whatever you want, but wanting what you do. When you're always available out of obligation, fear, or guilt, you are not free. You are a prisoner of other people's expectations, but when you consciously choose where to invest your time and energy, when you are present because you want to be and not because you feel forced, then yes, you are truly free. Now let's address the elephant in the room, the fear that stops most people from making this transformation. The fear of loneliness. The terror that if you're not always available, you'll end up alone, that people will abandon you, that you'll discover no one actually cares about you. This fear is so powerful that it keeps millions of people trapped in destructive cycles of excessive availability. But here's what Socrates and the Stoics discovered, and this is going to change everything for you. Loneliness does not come from being alone. Loneliness comes from being disconnected from yourself. You can be surrounded by people all the time, always available, always responding, always present, and still feel profoundly alone. Why? Because none of those connections are real. None of them touch your true essence. They're superficial interactions that leave you even emptier than before. Socrates spent long periods in solitary contemplation, and he wasn't alone. He was in the company of the most important person there is, himself. He was cultivating his inner world, strengthening his character, refining his thoughts. And when he emerged from these sessions, he had something genuine to offer others. Not crumbs of fragmented attention, but real presence, deep, powerful, transformative. Marcus Aurelius, even as emperor of Rome with thousands of people around him, wrote about the importance of creating an inner refuge. He said we don't need to flee to mountains or beaches to find peace. We can retreat within ourselves at any moment, and that ability to be at peace with yourself is what truly frees you from the fear of loneliness. Here's the liberating truth. When you learn to be okay alone, when you develop a rich and satisfying relationship with yourself, something magical happens. You stop accepting crumbs of attention. You stop tolerating one-sided relationships. You stop being available to people who don't value you. Why? Because you know your own company is better than bad company. And guess what happens then? You attract different people. People who respect boundaries because they have their own. People who value quality over quantity. People who want genuine connection, not superficial convenience. Your circle may get smaller, but the depth and quality of your relationships multiply exponentially. The Stoics had an exercise called amor fati, love of fate. They practiced accepting and even loving everything that happens, including losses. When you start setting boundaries and some people drift away, don't mourn. Celebrate. You're creating space for what truly matters. You're removing what is superficial to make room for what is profound. Now let me tell you about one of the most fascinating aspects of Socrates' philosophy that applies perfectly here. He had a concept called aporia, which literally means no path or perplexity. He would lead people into a productive confusion where they realized what they thought they knew was wrong. And that was uncomfortable, even painful, but it was necessary for real growth. When you decide to stop being always available, you will experience your own aporia. You will question everything. Am I being selfish? Am I doing the right thing? Will I regret this? That discomfort is a sign you're growing. You're challenging deeply rooted patterns. You're rebuilding your identity on stronger foundations. Trust the process. Socrates also spoke about the importance of constantly examining our beliefs. He said that the unexamined life is not worth living. So examine your beliefs about availability. Where do they come from? Are they truly yours? Or were they imposed by society, family, culture? Did you choose to believe you must always be available? Or did you simply never question it? The answer to those questions will reveal a lot about why you're stuck in this pattern. And when you bring these beliefs into the light of consciousness, when you examine them rationally, many of them crumble. You realize they're just stories you've been telling yourself, not absolute truths. And stories can be rewritten. There's a Stoic teaching from Seneca that fits perfectly here. He said, "It's not that we have little time, but that we waste much of it." Think about all the hours you've wasted being available for things that didn't matter, for people who didn't value you, for conversations that went nowhere. If you added up all that time, how many months, how many years would you get back? And what would you do with that time? Would you develop that skill you've always wanted to learn? Would you work on that project you've been postponing for years? Would you finally take care of your health, your well-being, your dreams? The cruel irony is that by being always available to others, you become completely unavailable to yourself. You steal from yourself the time needed to become who you could truly be. Socrates had a clear mission. He believed he had been chosen by the gods to be a gadfly of Athens, stinging people awake from their moral and intellectual sleep. And he was willing to be misunderstood, criticized, even killed for this mission, because he knew that some things are more important than social approval or temporary comfort. Now we're going to reach the deepest core of this transformation. What really changes when you stop being constantly available? It's not just your external relationships. It's not just your free time. What changes is something far more fundamental, something Socrates considered the essence of human life, your ability to seek truth and live according to virtue. When you are constantly available, your mind never rests. You never have space for deep reflection. You never have enough silence to hear your own inner voice, the one that knows what is truly important, what truly matters. You become reactive instead of proactive. You respond to the world instead of creating your own path, and this takes you further and further away from who you really are. Socrates had something he called the daimonion, an inner voice that guided him. It wasn't a hallucination or delusion, it was his deep conscience, his intuition refined through years of self-examination. This voice warned him when he was about to do something wrong. But here's the crucial detail. This voice could only be heard in silence, in stillness, in moments of introspection. If Socrates had been constantly available, constantly reacting to external demands, he would never have developed such a profound connection to his own inner wisdom. You have that voice too. Everyone does. But it's being drowned out by constant noise, endless notifications, and never-ending demands. When was the last time you truly heard your deep intuition? When was the last time you had a real insight about your life, about who you are, about what you truly want? These revelations don't happen in the middle of chaos. They happen in the quiet space you create by protecting your time and mental space. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations at night after exhausting days ruling an empire. He could easily have spent that time at banquets, enjoying entertainment, or dealing with even more administrative matters. There was always more work, always more people needing him. But he understood that those moments of reflection were not a luxury. They were a necessity. Without them, he would lose himself in the whirlwind of responsibilities and expectations. And here's something that might shock you. When you set firm boundaries and stop being constantly available, you don't become less useful to the people you love. You become more useful. Why? Because when you are present, you are truly present. Your mind is clear. Your energy is renewed. Your heart is open. You can offer genuine presence rather than fragmented attention. Think of a doctor. If a doctor works 24 hours straight without rest because they want to be constantly available to their patients, what happens? They make mistakes. Their judgment becomes impaired. They may end up causing more harm than good. But if they rest, if they set boundaries, if they take care of themselves, they can save far more lives with mental clarity and renewed energy. The same principle applies to every aspect of life. The Stoics had a concept called sympathia, which means the interconnectedness of all things. They believed that when you improve yourself, you improve the entire world. When you establish healthy boundaries, when you stop being constantly available, when you protect your own mental peace, you are not being selfish. You are elevating your capacity to genuinely contribute to the good of others. Now let me reveal something few people understand about Socrates. He wasn't popular with everyone. Many people found him annoying, arrogant, bothersome. Why? Because he refused to play the social game. He refused to pretend agreement just to avoid conflict. He refused to be available for superficial conversations that led nowhere. He had high standards for himself and for others, and that irritated many people. But do you know who truly valued him? People like Plato, who would become one of the greatest philosophers of all time, Xenophon, who would preserve his teachings for posterity, Alcibiades, who despite all his flaws recognized Socrates' greatness. The right people, those seeking real growth and genuine truth, were irresistibly drawn to him. Not because he was always available, but because when he was present, he was unforgettable. This is the paradigm shift you need to make. Stop trying to please everyone. Stop trying to be available to everyone. Accept that some people will not like your boundaries. And this is not only acceptable, it is desirable. Because the people who are bothered by your healthy boundaries are precisely the ones who were benefiting from your lack of them. There is a Stoic teaching that says, if you are hurt by someone's words, It is you who gave them the power to hurt you. When someone criticizes you for setting boundaries, for not being constantly available, for prioritizing your well-being, the pain you feel comes from your own insecurity. It comes from the lingering belief that you need others' approval to have value, but you don't. Your worth is intrinsic. It exists regardless of how many people approve of or criticize you. Socrates was sentenced to death by a vote. Of the 501 jurors, 280 voted for his conviction and 221 for his acquittal. It was a narrow margin. But even knowing that nearly half the people supported him, Socrates didn't change his position to please the majority. He didn't bow. He didn't compromise his principles. And that is why, more than 2,000 years later, we still talk about him, not because he pleased everyone, but because he remained true to himself until the very end. We now arrive at the final revelation, the one I promised at the beginning, and the one that will completely transform your understanding of everything we've discussed. The deepest truth about no longer being constantly available is not about other people. It never was. It's about you reclaiming something that was stolen from you, something so precious that your entire life depends on it, your personal sovereignty. When you are always available, you are living on the outskirts of your own existence. You become a satellite orbiting other people's lives instead of being the sun around which your own life revolves. You become an extra in everyone else's movie, forgetting that you were meant to be the protagonist of your own. And this inversion is the source of all the suffering, exhaustion, and emptiness you feel. Socrates said that the greatest wisdom is to know yourself. But how can you know yourself if you are never with yourself? How can you discover who you truly are if you are constantly shaping yourself to meet other people's expectations? How can you develop your own voice if you are always echoing the voices of others? The answer is simple and devastating. You can't. Here is the truth no one tells you. Every time you say yes when you want to say no, you betray yourself. Every time you make yourself available when you need rest, you abandon yourself. Every time you prioritize others' needs over your own basic needs, you commit violence against your own soul. And eventually this repeated betrayal turns you into a stranger to yourself. Marcus Aurelius wrote something that should be carved into everyone's mind. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. When you are always available, you hand that power away. You allow external events, other people's demands, and society's expectations to control your life. And without that power, you have no strength, only exhaustion, resentment, and the persistent feeling that you are living the wrong life. But when you reclaim your sovereignty, when you set firm boundaries, when you protect your time and energy as the sacred treasures they are, something extraordinary happens. You begin to reconnect with yourself. You begin to hear that inner voice that has always known what's right for you. You begin to feel true peace, the kind that doesn't depend on external circumstances, the kind the Stoics called ataraxia, unshakable tranquility. And here is the final paradox, the secret Socrates lived and few understand. When you stop seeking approval, you become more admirable. When you stop being constantly available, you become more desired. When you stop trying to please everyone, you attract the right people. Why? Because authenticity is magnetic. Integrity is attractive. Someone who knows who they are and lives according to their values radiates a kind of energy that no amount of availability or approval-seeking can reproduce. Socrates had no wealth. He had no political power. He had no extraordinary physical beauty, but he had something everyone sought and few ever find. He was completely himself. He had conquered his own soul. He was free in a way most people never experience. And that freedom, that authenticity, that total integrity was so powerful that it still resonates across millennia. Now it's your turn to make a choice. You can keep living as you have, always available, always seeking approval, always betraying yourself to meet other people's expectations. And you already know exactly where that path leads. More exhaustion, more emptiness, more nights staring at the ceiling wondering why you feel so lost in your own life. Or you can choose the path of Socrates, the path of the Stoics, the path of personal sovereignty. This path is not easy. There will be resistance. People will test your limits. Some will pull away. You will feel guilt, fear, uncertainty. But on the other side of that journey lies something worth infinitely more than any temporary discomfort. It's you, the real you, not the diluted version you became by trying to please everyone, not the satellite orbiting other people's lives, but the protagonist of your own existence, living with purpose, peace, and authentic power. Epictetus, who began life as a slave and became one of the greatest sages in history, said something that perfectly summarizes everything we've discussed. Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. Your availability is under your control. Your boundaries are under your control. Your life is under your control. The question is, will you take that control, or will you keep handing it over to anyone who asks? If you've watched this far, you already know the answer. Something inside you resonated with this message. Something inside you recognized the truth in these words. Now, what will you do with this knowledge? Knowledge without action is just entertainment, but knowledge with action is transformation. Start today, right now. Pick up your phone and turn off all non-essential notifications. Set a specific time to check messages instead of being constantly on alert. Say no to something you would normally say yes to just to please someone. Create a sacred space in your day that is yours alone, non-negotiable, unavailable to anyone. These small steps are the beginning of your journey back to yourself. And always remember, when you stop being constantly available, everything changes. But the most important change is not how others see you. It's how you see yourself. It's reclaiming your self-respect. It's recognizing yourself in the mirror again. It's finally living as the protagonist of your own story, not as a background character in everyone else's. Socrates died for the truth. You don't have to go that far. But you do need to be willing to disappoint some people, to disrupt some expectations, to break some patterns. Because on the other side lies the life you truly want to live, the life you were born to live, the life that's waiting for you to be brave enough to claim it. If this video impacted you, if these words touched something deep within you, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, leave a like, and more importantly, share this message with someone who needs to hear it. In the comments, write, "I reclaim my sovereignty." Declare to the universe and to yourself that you are ready for this transformation. And if you want to continue this journey of self-discovery and personal growth, there are 2 videos appearing on your screen right now that will deepen these teachings even further. One explores how Socrates faced adversity with unshakable serenity, and the other reveals the Stoic secrets to building unbreakable mental resilience. Watch them. Absorb this wisdom, and more importantly, live it. The life you've always wanted is waiting on the other side of your courage to set boundaries. It's waiting on the other side of your decision to stop being constantly available. It's waiting for you to claim your personal sovereignty. And I promise you, when you take that step, when you truly embody these teachings, you will look back and wonder how you lived so long without them. Your journey begins now. Choose wisely.